Welcome to the Humans Outside podcast, where we focus on heading outdoors from our perch in Alaska while hearing from fascinating outside-minded guests. I'm Amy Bouchatz, and since 2017, I've spent at least 20 consecutive minutes outside every single day. On this show, we hear from others who make heading into nature just a part of who they are too. Ready? Here we go. If you listen to season 1, you remember our fascinating discussion with Derek Abbey, an actual certified forest therapist. She talked about what forest therapy is, why you should give it a try for yourself, and how she uses it for herself. In season 1, we also talked to Corey Weathers, who spoke with us about how heading outside can be a tool in building better relationships because of the way it creates shared experiences. Back to Michelle. Michelle is just one half of the Abbey duo. Derek Abbey, a Marine Corps veteran who leads Project Recover, which helps fund the recovery of the remains of U.S. troops missing in action, is the second Abbey. Together, Michelle and Derek use the outdoors in the way guest Corey Weathers described, as a tool in the care and keeping of their relationship. And today, they are both here to talk to us about that, including, hopefully, some tips and tricks for replicating what they've done. Derek and Michelle, welcome to the Humans Outside podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
So as Michelle knows, we start these conversations just sort of like envisioning ourselves chatting in our guest's favorite outdoor space. So Michelle, I know you and I had one you loved before, but maybe there's a place we can go in our brains, obviously, with both of you at the same time. What do we got?
I love that. And I have the perfect place, actually, that's special to me. There's a peak called Boca Chica Peak in Olympic National Park. And it's up in the Olympic Mountains. It looks down into the Seven Lakes Basin up there, and you can see the stretch of Hurricane Ridge and other mountaintops. It's an absolute beautiful place, and it's actually one of the first places Michelle and I went together on an outdoors adventure. So I picked that spot.
And why did you pick that spot as the first place you went together on an outdoor adventure?
Well, I grew up in the Northwest, and Olympic National Park is a very special place to me. It's my favorite national park, mostly because of nostalgia. So going there as a kid, but it's just an incredible place because you can literally go from the beach to rainforest to alpine all in the same day. It's an incredible national park, and then it just has a special place in my heart. So it was it was our first trip to a national park together.
Yep.
Awesome. Love it. Everyone knows, I think, that I am a national park enthusiast, so I can totally endorse this.
We are, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you guys have this little group couples challenge to visit national parks, right?
Yeah, that's right. So we're trying to visit every national park, all now 62 of them.
We're not trying, we are.
Yeah, we are. And,
great attitude.
Yeah, it only counts if we do it together. So it's not I've been to one and she hasn't been to one, so that doesn't count. And so far, I think we're at 18.
Yeah, around 18.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, the invite to at least point you in the right direction in Alaska certainly stands, although I have not been to all the national parks here, so I would love to go with you guys.
Yeah.
It's definitely a bucket list.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, Michelle, when you and I talked, we pretty much talked exclusively about forest therapy, what it is and what it means. And I don't want to dwell on that today, but I was hoping you could remind everyone with a quick description.
Sure. So I guide forest therapy walks, and what we're doing basically is we're getting people into the outdoors to connect with nature and to connect with nature in a very basic, present way using their five senses, or starting out with their basic five senses, and we kind of move on to other senses beyond that. But just kind of helping them to slow down and use those senses that I feel in today's society have just become a bit more dulled on an everyday basis, because we're trying to pay attention to other things, so we don't pay attention to those senses anymore. So practicing using them out in the outdoor space, and to be able to connect to nature in a way we normally don't do because we just don't slow down enough. And in that time, I see a lot of wonderful things happen to people. And a different thing is going to happen with every person, just depending on what's going on in their head that day and what it is they need to work through. And they're allowed that time to do that in nature.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So,
Mhm.
what we did not talk about before was how you've experienced nature and the outdoors beyond your professional work. So, I'm excited to dive into that today. But I want to do the same with Derek. So, first, Derek, give
Yeah.
us a lowdown on what you like to do outside and how that came to be, how you got to that point.
I like to do pretty much everything outside, and Michelle and I live in Bend, Oregon, so that it makes living here makes that really easy. We can walk across the street into undeveloped land and go for a hike or a run or a bike ride. Um, as the seasons change, we're snowshoeing and other winter sports, or we live 10 minutes from Deschutes River, so we can be paddleboarding on the river in the morning. And my connection to the outdoors really just, I think, started growing up in the Northwest. So I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and also my family was if you're going to do something, get outside, get outside. We didn't have video games, or we did. They were coming about when I was a kid, but really it was my most of my time as a youth was spent outside. And then as I've grown older, I just really love the escape and kind of turning off the rest of the world and going and spending time in nature. And I honestly do that in any way that I possibly can. I don't participate in every single sport, but I definitely hike and backpack and run and I like to do those in nature. And I don't even do like road races anymore. So running like a marathon or another race like that, for the most part don't do any of those city runs anymore. Now I like to do them in the outdoors, and I rarely wear headphones when I'm running in nature. Like a lot of people, you see them running down the road in town, and I used to do that, and I'd have my headphones on as a distraction and things like that. But when I take off and go for a run in the outdoors, I really want to connect with it. So I try and run by a river and listen to the river, or listen to the birds, or things like that. It's just it's has such what I think is a positive impact on my life.
It sounds like Michelle's rubbing off on you.
Correct. I was going to
Yes,
say you're
absolutely.
welcome.
Yeah. And Michelle, both, yeah. Sometimes she needs to go outside, but it doesn't take a lot of effort.
Yeah. Michelle, what about you? What's your outdoor background before, forest therapy, before that became a profession and a calling? What brought you outside to start with?
Yeah. Well, I'm like Derek. As a kid, yeah, I loved to play outside. I was big on play, which I think all kids were when we were young, really.
Yeah.
And my stepmom, actually, we lived on a little 8-acre ranch, and she raised horses, and we had all kinds of different animals, and I loved animals and hanging out with them. But if I think about it, I feel like in my teenage and kind of early college years, it wasn't, I don't know if outdoors was as important to me, maybe possibly because I grew up in Louisiana and the weather there is just horrible. But I wouldn't say that I consciously considered it part of my values in my teenage and early 20s. It wasn't until I moved to San Diego and found the outdoors as pleasurable. I quickly got into, well, kind of quickly got into running, and quickly from running I got into triathlon, and started hanging out with that crowd, which meant made sure that I was outside all the time. So my initial experience in wanting to be outdoors and enjoying the outdoors was a lot of pushing myself in races. So while I was outdoors, I was definitely kind of focused a little bit more on me. I appreciated the outdoors, that's for sure, especially moving to San Diego and appreciating the beautiful weather we had there. Um, but I feel like slowly but surely that appreciation kind of grew more into connection,
Mm.
especially when I came across the forest therapy certification and that work. And so it was just really cool to kind of see that switch and that growth from the appreciation into connection, which I think are kind of two different things, but really cool when you see it develop. And Now, of course, I always say that I blame forest therapy for really slowing down my running time. I guess I do a lot of stopping, and Derek and I also do a lot of stopping more hiking, particularly me, because I'm always taking pictures of all the plants because I got to figure out what they are. I feel like it's definitely added, value and quality to my life to have done that.
It's interesting what you're talking about, the appreciation. I'm sorry, you said appreciation versus um,
Connection.
connection. Okay. So it's interesting that you bring that up because as we get closer and dive into maybe some weather changes that are not everyone's ideal, right? I'm getting a lot of questions from folks asking me, how do you continue to go outside when the weather's not great, right? Because it's really easy to make a habit out of this in the summer when all you need is a light jacket, or it's easy to find things to do, or there are things to do that are well within your comfort zone. It's a lot
Mhm.
harder when it requires buying some new gear or figuring out what to do when it's cold. And I wonder if you see that a lot, that people start doing outside things because there's something to do and then move from it to being that connection. Because what I told someone actually just today was that, well, yes, 'cause she said, I don't want to just go outside to go outside. Like, I don't want to just go for a walk just to muscle through it. And what I told her was, well, I mean, that's how it starts. Like, you kind of have to muscle through it. But at some point, you're going to be going outside because you want to, right?
Mhm.
Even though the weather's bad, you're going to just buy the big jacket already. Okay. Just do it. And then you're going to put the big jacket on and you're going to go outside because it's something that you have to do, not because you committed to going outside every day, but because you know that for you, this is what you have to do. And it becomes a practice of appreciation. Am I crazy, or is this a like normal thing that you see other people talking about?
I, you know, so I feel that many people, I don't know if they move past the point of appreciation to connection. I mean, maybe on
Mm,
certain different levels, but not completely. I think a lot of people throughout their lives take their enjoyment of the outdoors as it's a place where I run, it's a place where I exercise, it's a place where I connect with friends. And again, yeah, it's pretty to them. It's a nice, beautiful background, but I don't know if there's that true like sensory connection consciously that they're
mhm,
going through. And then, especially like you talk about the point of where people start to love it so much that they're willing to go out in not as exciting conditions. I think to get to that point, the point of where you're going to push past your comfort zone to go outside is also maybe something that a lot of people a point that they don't get to.
mhm,
There's,
mhm,
oddly enough, I just had a conversation about this last week with a mutual friend of ours, Brian Von Hercules. Him and I spent 4 days, hiking around Mount Hood,
mm,
and oddly enough, we were planning on doing it in 3 days, and then we ended up adding an extra day to it. But part of our discussion while we were out there, as we were appreciating and connecting with the wilderness and being outside, we had a discussion around, you know, actually, I mean, the discomfort piece of it, literally getting outside of your comfort zone. We're so shielded, and we have these luxuries of the society that we live in, but in many ways that kind of dulls down our senses. And part of the what I like about going outside is being a bit uncomfortable
Mhm.
and being reminded that I'm alive and that I have the capability to challenge myself in certain ways. We talked about exercise, but then, oh yeah, I might be a little cold, or I might be a little dirty, or this hill might be, a long climb, or things like that. But it adds to the hardiness that I think a lot of people are missing out on. And I can think back of a conscious moment when I was spending time outside, and oddly enough, it was in Iraq. And I was on a deployment there, and I would run. And most people know that Iraq is a desert, but the winters get very, very cold, and the wind blasts across the desert, and it can feel like it cuts through you. And I remember enjoying going out in those runs when it would rain and the wind would blow, and because it reminded me that I was alive. The,
mm,
the,
mhm,
the cold and the hurt on my skin, And I'm not a sadist or anything like that, but just the reminder that, oh, I'm hardy, I'm alive, I can feel these different feelings and senses and things like that, and they're part of the experience. I truly believe, and they add value to your life.
I think the soft word for that hurt is called invigorating, right? People
Yes.
that right? It's invigorating. What they mean is that it's not that nice. So
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. That is a great word.
okay, so it's interesting, Derek, that you bring that up because that's exactly a great segue into talking about the couples thing that I promised we would talk about on this podcast. And it's actually what Corey and I talked about in the episode I mentioned earlier about building relationships or using the outdoors rather to build relationships. So let's pivot a little bit and talk about the role that heading outside plays in y'all's relationship. And we'll get to the doing hard things here in a second. So talk to me about that. What is the role? How do you see the outdoors as being a part of it? Is three a crowd with the outdoors?
Not at all.
No, but we definitely spend a lot of time together outdoors, and the more numbers that you add to it, the more difficult it becomes.
Yeah, it does become more
something.
difficult.
But the spending time outdoors has always been a piece of our relationship, and I think it's something that really makes our relationship strong. So we actually don't buy gifts for each other in the sense that when our birthdays come around or Christmas comes around or other holidays where people tend to give each other gifts, we actually we share experiences.
Hmm.
And so our birthdays happen to be 6 days apart in August. And so
An excellent time to have a birthday. I
it
think
is.
you and I share a
Well,
birthday, do we not, Derek?
we do, the
Yes.
best one. And Michelle's is 6 days after mine, and so we usually try to plan some sort of trip, and we try to do it to a national park for our birthdays, or multiple national parks, and then we do the same thing for Christmas time. We'll try and visit a national park and experience those, and now we're it's an intangible, but it's a shared experience. We're spending time together. It's not this kind of token or whatever that you many people give as a gift, and then you're trying to figure out if it measures up to what the expectation was, or things like that. So
Right.
we have enough things. We don't need any more things. Although we get outdoor gear every once in a while, and other things. But it's not. We have events around those occasions, and almost all of the time, those events include an outdoor experience. Whenever we're traveling somewhere, we look to see, oh, is there a hike we can go on in this area, or some neat place that we could go visit. And even, Michelle brought up growing up in Louisiana and loving the weather and stuff of San Diego, and now we're in Bend because we love the outdoors and what Bend has to offer. But as I've gone through time, that appreciation and connection of the diversity of the places that we can go from, the mountains of the Northwest and things like that, but then also going and seeing some swamp in the South is also now really, really fascinating because we've started to connect more with like the floral and fauna in those
Mhm.
areas. And so really from the very, very beginning when we first met, we realized that we had this deep appreciation for the outdoors, and our relationship has just continued to grow around that, and to the point where we were living in Southern California and we were spending all of our time in the outdoors, and oftentimes that included driving 3 hours to get to a trail that happened to be packed with people. Well, when we were no longer anchored there, we intentionally picked out a place to move to that we could more easily have these outdoor experiences together. And now it's a daily occurrence.
I was just gonna say, I think something really important in how um, us sharing the outdoors has benefited our relationship and made it stronger are two things. I think about communication and I think about expectations. Two things that I think are important things in a relationship to address.
Pretty important.
Two very important things to address. And the thing that about expectations, for instance, that I think is helpful when we share our outdoor experiences. So I tend to be a bit more of a planner, scheduler. I have a lot of expectations and I can see what I want to happen. Derek is a little bit better at just kind of going with the flow. And so I think that that's been helpful when we go on these experiences together, that I've been able to calm down a little bit on the expectation setting, and I've become a bit better at going with the flow. And Derek has become a little bit more accepting of my scheduling. So we've kind of like, found this kind of middle ground. I mean, yeah, we're still different and everything, but we know that about each other, and we're kind of able to make it harmonious in our relationship. And then with the communication piece, I think this is huge. And I've seen these examples in a lot of couples that do a lot of hikes and races and things like that together. So I feel like you always hear about the arguments or the fights or the just ill feelings that couples may end up having towards one another if they do like a hike or a run. And the problem is that they're trying to stay side by side, and you've got one of them that's like stronger and the other one that's weaker, and he's getting pissed because she can't keep up. She's getting pissed because he's trying to pull her along, and that never works out so well. Well, Derek and I, when we go out on a lot of our hikes, well, definitely when we race, we know, we give each other a kiss at the beginning and it's like, see you later. And a lot of times, Derek's, flying up the hills, and then he slows down. I'm flying down the hills. So, if we were to try to stay with each other, like we would always be mad at each other because we're both strong on one end of that hill. And so we've learned that, and I feel like it's just a good communication skill to know that about each other, expect it, and be okay with it.
Right.
And I think it spills out into other areas of our relationship, which again is another thing that I see in a lot of relationships. Is sometimes I feel that people will try so hard to be together in a relationship as one, that there are ways they don't allow each other to grow individually. And I feel like with Derek, I finally found that person where, oh, we're really good at just allowing each other to grow individually, yet we still, are together. And it's just, yeah, it's a cool thing. And
A collective identity, but then also individual identities. And there's overlap in those individual identities as well. But we acknowledge that and support each other in each of their individual endeavors. And I just want to point out and make sure that it doesn't sound like I'm a faster runner, because Michelle did beat me in our ultra that we ran last year. So
That's because walking the hills is always a good idea.
yes, right.
Remember that.
Yeah.
there was a big or not a snowstorm, a
big storm.
a storm that came through, and that gave
Fear
her some
made
motivation.
me fast. Yeah.
That's also a strategy, That's so great. So, one thing that hops to mind while you're talking about looking at other couples who have challenges with this is, my family and I really enjoy these sort of adventure race TV shows, like The Amazing Race. I'm an Amazing Race junkie. And when I had my surgery, spent quite a lot more time watching TV than I ever have in months and months and months. So, The Amazing Race is an excellent family-friendly show, right? It's not, you don't have to shoo your kids out of the room at any point. So we watch that. And that it's like based off of this premise of poor communication among couples, because there's two people. So whether it's like an actual man, woman, or man couple, or, whatever, a romantic relationship, or just two friends, right? The whole premise of the show is conflict between the two people on the team. And you see that they have to stay together for the most part, or they have to do things individually while the other one watches helplessly. And the whole thing is based off of this lack of communication. But if you watch the seasons where there's a really successful team, first of all, they're not as fun to watch because, again, the entire premise is the conflict.
That's not
But
good.
they're right. But they're fun in their own way, because you watch the success of this team, and it is a communications thing that they are able to expectation manage and not get each other's throats, and able to tell each other, what they need in that moment, or give instructions of, what one person knows that the other doesn't, and so on and so forth. So that's just what came to my mind. I know that you guys moved to Oregon very, very intentionally to pursue better or more outdoor life. What else of this has been intentional? Or was this sort of a natural progression to spending time outside as a couple, just based on your own personal preferences?
Well, I think I think we just realized it from the very, very beginning that we had this, draw to spending time in nature in a variety of ways, and then we realized that as we just kind of moved forward in our relationship that we it was good for us, that we really, really enjoyed it as individuals and as a couple, and, we found just everything that we were doing in our free time included, taking off to a mountain or going to some national park or an adventure on a river or something like that. And so it was difficult on the logistics side to do that in Southern California just because of all the people and the distance that you would have to travel. And so we realized more and more that we liked this and we wanted to get somewhere closer to it and yeah, we just doubled down on it. And I think initially it was just an unconscious thing. It was, yeah, that I like this, you like this, let's do this together. And then we realized just, well, we both love this and this is good for our relationship and we're just going to keep on doing it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is pretty neat. And the cool thing about Bend and Michelle mentioned that I'm fine with the impromptu. Let's go do something. Um, and especially during this ongoing pandemic, and now my home office is my workplace, so I can, you can find yourself just being stuck in a room or behind a computer. And Michelle is really good about just coming in and be like, hey, let's take a break and go down to the river, or let's take a break and go for a run or a hike or a walk or anything like that. And
Totally.
it's really easy to access these things. So I think it started off as not so conscious. It just seemed like the natural thing to do. And then it became far more conscious as we grew in our relationship.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because for some people I think it's the opposite, right? You have to make that effort and then it becomes just something that you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. True.
But neither way is wrong. Like, as long as we get to the end result where we're experiencing this benefit of, this free, literally natural resource, then, whatever, let's just do
Mhm.
it. Um, you guys have done quite a lot of like very epic things as a couple. You've sort of nonchalantly mentioned ultra running and snowstorm races, and oh, just that's a Tuesday. Uh, what what's like something epic that pops to mind that we can fill people in on? What's something epic, really epic that you've done together?
Last year's race was pretty
I
epic.
think, yeah, the
Yeah.
Beaverhead Ultra Marathon was pretty epic. I mean, that was an incredible race. We did the 55K, so about 36 miles. Most of it on the Continental Divide Trail between Idaho and Montana, and but just I mean, I like the storms that roll through. I mentioned, the invigoration of it. But you're running on this quote unquote trail, if you want to call it that.
Talus Fields.
Yeah, Talus Fields, and then on one side of you is a 1,500-foot drop off, and then from the other side is this thunderstorm coming in, and you're slipping and sliding on some rocks,
You
and
are.
you definitely feel alive up there. But I think that's probably one of our most epic
I think.
adventures. And
When we did
although,
Whitney, that
yeah,
was.
we did
I guess some people would call that epic.
in 2018, we did the highest point in the lower 48 and the highest point and the lowest point in the lower 48. So we climbed Mount Whitney. We did a single day ascent of Whitney, and then for Christmas we had a picnic in Badwater in Death Valley, which is the lowest point in the continental United States. So
Yeah,
that
that's
was
fun.
pretty cool. And
Does Death Valley get cold the same way Iraq does?
well, we didn't spend that much time there. It was actually pretty nice when we were there,
It was. It was amazing.
and pretty comfortable. I mean, it was kind of silly because um, we we got dressed up and we hiked all this picnic gear out to the middle of
Mile and a half.
yeah, Badwater, and in a suit, it was kind of hot.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we could take these cool pictures out in the middle of this national park, but yeah, it turned out to be a pretty cool picture. Another one that I really enjoyed was, I think that was the Christmas before that. We hiked up to we spent that day in Sequoia National Park, and it was supposed to be a snowshoe adventure, but it ended up being micro spikes because there wasn't a lot of snow on most of the trail, but there was a lot of ice. And we hiked up to this ski cabin and spent the night there, and then woke up on Christmas morning and hiked up to Pear Lake, which is just this mountain lake in the Sierra. And we were by ourselves that morning in the Sierra, which is just absolutely incredible. So we've had some pretty cool epic adventures.
I think those sound epics, and I appreciate the devotion to getting cool photos. Got to do it for the gram, man.
Yeah, the gram. Yeah. And we stole that. So we stole that idea. Oddly enough, on another trip, we were going to visit Bryce Canyon for another Christmas, and we wanted to see the snow on the hoodoos. And we were staying in Kanab, Utah, and just happened to be having dinner. And these three British guys sat down next to us, and we just struck up a conversation. And they mentioned going to Death Valley. I think it was on Thanksgiving.
They were in like tuxes or something.
Yeah. And they shared their photos with us, and we just immediately said, we're stealing that idea. We're going to go do the same thing. But I mean, that was another thing. We have 62 national parks, and that's just national parks. That doesn't include national forests and all these other incredible monuments, incredible places around our country. And they're so diverse, and many people just don't go out and visit them. And I just feel like, man, you're missing out. And so seeing somebody from another country come and spend time in this incredible space that we have here in our country was nice to see. And I wish more people would take advantage of these opportunities.
Hey humans, just a quick break to tell you how you can support the Humans Outside podcast. Did you know we're on Patreon? Patreon allows fans like you to support the podcast through a monthly pledge. By pledging a little cash each month to support the Humans Outside podcast, you can have access to my bonus features, guides, discount codes, and an exclusive episode on... You know what? Actually, just go check it out. You'll also get my eternal gratitude, of course. Check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/humansoutside. That's patreon.com/humansoutside. Now, back to the show. So hard things get real hard fast in the wilderness. We've talked about snowstorms, we talked about, all sorts of adventures. You probably have a certain tolerance level for a friend pushing you that you don't have for a spouse. So like when I'm out running with my friend, I'm okay if she's just sort of nagging me on. But when it's my spouse, I'm less kind about that, right? And might just, he might not make it off the trail. We don't know, So, I took Luke actually on a 30-mile run this summer that he was arguably very not ready for, although he totally crushed it. Okay. But he wanted to do it. And it's possible that he now refers to it as the death run, but who can say? So how do you get past those moments of trail anger and frustration that, and make them help your relationship instead of hurt it?
So it's funny, the weird thing that I feel like I experience, I feel like it's something totally different. Because Derek doesn't really push me. If anything, I probably push him. So he's probably going to be able to comment on that more than I am. But what I do realize I do very much when I am, say, on like a hard hike or a hard run or something with Derek, I feel like more so with him, I allow my weakness to show more than when I'm with a friend. So if I'm with a friend or someone that's not Derek, I'll put on the tough suit and act like I'm hardcore, but I will definitely allow, and I think it's just because I am the most comfortable with Derek, and I consider Derek my knight in shining armor who's going to save me and take care of me if needed. And so I I don't know. I guess I have weirdly this thing in the back of my head that I can allow myself to be weaker around him, and sometimes I don't realize it, and I'm like, oh, I'm doing that thing again.
There's been a couple times where he's gotten a little frustrated with me. Usually, it's dealt with heights. I think.
Oh yeah, well that's totally different. Well, that's pushing in a different way. But that's the other thing that's about me is I like to put myself. I love to push back past discomfort. It's hard and it's really uncomfortable, but I do love to push past it. But I do need someone to push me. I can't do it all on my own. And so Derek is good in the heights thing. I've had a couple of wonky times, specifically on what was it?
Mount St. Helens.
Mount St. Helens. Oh yeah, Mount St. Helens. Well, I'm thinking about South. Okay, there's a few. There's a few. And I get woozy. I feel vertigo. I feel like I'm gonna fall off a mountain or whatever. And so I just need to focus on him, and again, I allow my weakness to show, so I say way more curse words around him and bitch a lot. I'm sorry, I said sorry. My phone was quick.
But Derek, you like take that on, like that's not a we're never doing this again moment for you, because I think that if I was out with a friend, it depends how good of a friend, right? Because there's friends where you're this vulnerable with, and then there's not. But I think if I was out with a friend who was always turning to me for those moments, I would be maybe less, I'd feel like, oh, can she keep up? Or, does she really want to do this? And maybe not seek that person out again.
We've had relationships like that where people, they advertise one thing and then they show up and you end up doing something completely different because the capability is not there, and that's okay. And my thing is to just be completely honest on what your capability is, and then we'll plan our event or our time around that. But I just try and stay calm when Michelle maybe gets a little worked up, and it doesn't happen very often. And the truth is most of the time it's related to food. Like you just need a snack.
Yeah, I'm hungry.
This is my life. I understand. This statement touches me very personally.
It's not that she's falling back or not performing. She just happens to be hangry.
Yeah,
and
that's a thing.
Get a snack out, and she's good. And then, but the Michelle also pushes me. She does take advantage of kind of my impromptu attitude. Not in a bad way, but she'll sign me up for things like, hey, do you want to do this race in Colorado? And I'll just say, yeah, okay. And, it turns out to be the Leadville Marathon, where the whole 10,000.
Oh, that race in Colorado.
Yeah, and then I'm in the middle of that race, like, how did I end up here? This is kind of, but I'm always happy. I'm believe it or not, I'm happy during the moment and definitely happy after it, because it's such they're always incredible experiences. I'm pretty sure you found the Beaverhead Ultra. And sometimes I think she thinks my ability is more than it is with some of these races that she signs me up for, but then we get out there and do it. Yeah.
But what you're saying is a trust thing, right? That you trust her to not take you on something that will end in your death, so even though it might feel like that,
that's not guaranteed, but it would be a nice way to go, I suppose. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. So I said I feel the food comment very deeply. I'm a food hoarder. So if I'm on a trail and I'm having a hard time, it is because I haven't eaten. And if I'm having a hard time, I will also not eat on purpose, because I think something in my head is like, what if you get to the end and you don't have a snack? So you better save this snack, even though arguably I have plenty of snacks, like it's not gonna be a problem. And, and you save this for later, even though there is no later, because I need to eat this right now or everyone's going to have a very bad time, mostly me. And so my friends have started, eat this now. So
take
it out of the bag and eat it right now. So
I'm the other way, where I'll just go and go and go and go throughout the whole day, and then she'll be like, have you eaten? Maybe you should eat a snack or something like that. And I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. No, I haven't eaten at all. And she never forgets to eat, that's
No,
for sure.
never.
But oh, yeah,
Never.
Yeah, it's not so much that I forgot, it's that I didn't want to because
no,
it's like a supply and demand thing.
I
Mhm.
understand.
Um, so I did this one really long run this summer. It was like 23-mile trail run. And it's a trail that's very popular with mountain bikers. And so actually we saw quite a few mountain bikers out there who were like, oh my God, I can't believe you're running this. And I'm thinking, why are you riding a bike?
Ugh,
So
yeah.
so sort of that situation, but it was a long trail. We weren't quite sure how long it was because some of the trail reports said 21 miles, some of them said 23. So to me, that just means you should hoard your snacks because who
Yeah.
knows how long we'll be out here. And so at around 20 miles, I needed to eat the three extra things I had in one of the three. Okay. Like it wasn't like a starvation situation. And I couldn't do it because I didn't know when the end was going to be. Even though it was, probably within a couple of miles, almost for sure. And so, yeah, I had to get over, it was a learning experience though, like all of these experiences are, because now I know I do that. And next time I'm having a really hard time, I'm going to have an honest conversation with myself about eating the snack, you know,
Mhm. Yeah.
uh, just eat the freaking snack, Amy. Come on. What's
Well,
your problem?
definitely in the ultra side of things, like training wise, I had to make sure I concentrated on, caloric intake and eating while I was doing my long training runs because, as you know, you get the distance in, you're going to need those calories to make it all the way through. And for somebody that usually doesn't have a lot of intake beyond water and a couple little snacks, I had to make sure that I was training so my body got used to it and actually worked out pretty well. I would stop at those aid stations and just gorge myself and manage to keep on going across those races.
So I think there are lots of, obviously there are a lot of different kinds of couples out there. Do you have advice for couples who maybe one partner is really outdoorsy, but the other one isn't, or maybe they are into two totally different kinds of outdoor experiences? You have people who really like to hunt and then people who really like to run, and they're not always the same people. Um, would you have any advice for the sort of meeting in the middle on that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if there is a potential type of quote unquote compromise that you can do, hey, maybe one person's the hunter and one person's the runner, but is there something that you can do to, um, find overlap where you can spend time outdoors? I think that's what I would recommend, or maybe even try new things together. One of the things that we've taken up significantly, both of us, since we've been to Bend, is I'm I am a birder now. Like I love searching for birds, and like I bought binoculars and everything for it, and we do it together. And then we talk about, obviously you got to do it outside, but then we talk about finding these different birds, and we kind of keep track of the different birds that are migrating through, and the ones that we've seen, and the one that we haven't. And if you would have asked me if I'd be interested in that, a year or two ago, I probably would have been like, yeah, I like seeing birds and stuff in the wild, but I wasn't completely nerding out on it. But now I nerd out on it, and it's something new in our relationship that we do together when we're walking.
Mm,
And there's so much you can do in the outdoors that's not just hiking. I mean,
Right.
there's tons and tons of things that you can do. So maybe just exploring new activities or trying something new as a couple in the outdoors, um, you might find something that you can do as a collective. And then again, now you have that collective identity, those things that you like to do in the outdoors, but then the individual pieces that um, you do by yourself, maybe without your spouse or your significant other.
Yeah, visiting places, like,
Yeah,
that's a really good one because it's
that's
quite easy. It's like, okay, you just have to go to the place.
yeah.
So, maybe there's, like, this place that both of you wanna
yeah.
see or, it's got some weird interesting thing to it, like, "Oh, let's go check that out."
And you can,
Yeah.
I mean, we've been talking so much about national parks. I mean, you don't have to, backpack into the
Yeah.
wilderness. You could stay at a lodge
Yeah.
and then do day hikes. Actually, Michelle introduced me to car camping. I never car camped until her and I became a couple. I was always a backpacker, and then she's like, "Oh, well, no, we can just drive in and camp here, and then we would do the hikes from there." I'm like, "Wow, I'm not carrying, all this weight. I'm just carrying some snacks and water."
Wildly wonderful.
And
It's
I could
amazing.
sleep in a more comfortable spot. And so I never car camped before. And I just hadn't even thought about it. I had only been a backpacker my whole life. And it just opened up this whole new experience for me that I hadn't thought about before. And so just things like that. Well, hey, maybe you haven't tried this, or you may not really know what it is, but as a couple, hey, let's try it out once. Or the other thing that I would recommend is, you know, if one person likes to do one thing, you can go back and forth, and maybe it's not
Right.
hunting. If
Try it
I don't
out.
know what I mean, but it's like, oh, well, you like to go for a run. Well, let's do a shorter run, and I'll participate on that run with you. And the other person likes to do, I don't know, um, paddleboarding or something like that. Okay, well,
Mhm.
let's try that or something like that. And so compromising, that where, hey, we'll do, a back and forth. You pick one, I'll pick one, things like that. That's another way to look at it. But I think the more I think the better one is, finding the thing that you just like
Together.
to do together.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because that's exactly what Corey Weathers was talking about in our episode with her. It's this idea of creating this shared space where you
Mhm.
have shared transformative experiences that
Mhm.
lead to having she uses the term sacred spaces, and she uses it in mostly in the context of military marriages where one partner is, say, deployed, and has a transformative experience downrange, and then the other partner is back home, has a different transformative experience. So one example would be my husband was deployed and a lot of people in his unit were killed, and then I was back home and I went to a lot of military memorial services on base. Those are two very different experiences that really impact us both quite strongly, but they're not something that either of us can really understand for the other. We just have to respect that they exist.
Mhm.
uh, a relationship draws apart when that's all you have. And instead, you need to be focused on creating shared experiences that are also transformative, hopefully in positive ways,
Mhm.
uh, that you can then harken back to. And the outdoors is great for that because you're doing hard things, you're conquering stuff, you're, learning that car camping is a thing. And you're having, you're learning how to slow down in the wilderness. You're learning how to go up those high peaks that you may not do on your own, and you're having these transformative experiences but together, and
Yeah,
that's something that you can build your relationship around going forward.
it
Yeah.
is, and it's so healthy. I mean, not just moving around and stuff like that with the things that we do, but just the time in nature. I mean, the science side of things that Michelle knows the science name of them. I call them tree farts, but the chemicals that the plants and trees give off that have a benefit to us. That there's that healthy element to being outside, but then disconnecting from the things that weigh us down so much in our day-to-day life, this overabundance of communication through TV and social media and all those things. It's really nice to disconnect from just that flooding of your senses in not so much a positive way, and then getting out and being able to slow down. And
Yeah.
then if you're conscious about it, maybe you're somebody that sits down and meditates. That's a great place to do it. But I've learned actually from other friends about just meditating in motion while spending time outside. And yeah, so I've dumped, the headphones because I want my senses to be stimulated by these things around me. And it could be the wind blowing through the trees, or it could be birds singing, or it could be the smell of, pine or whatever happens to be that you're within. There's just so much healthy benefit that comes from it.
Michelle, what's the technical name for tree farts, please?
Fighting sides.
It's
Thank
easier to
you.
remember tree farts,
It
and kids
so
will remember
is.
tree farts instead of fight
Yeah,
aside, see,
yeah.
and so will
you're
adults.
you're not wrong. I'm just, we like
Yeah,
to have both sides.
right,
Okay.
right.
All right. So we've come to the end, unfortunately, because I, like so many of our guests, I could talk to you guys forever. Uh, at the end of the podcast, we have a leftovers round where we just sort of wrap things up by talking about some of our favorite gear and then favorite moment outside. Michelle, when you were on the episode in season 1, you said your buff is your favorite outdoor gear and a headlamp and emergency blanket are your most essential. Has that changed? Is it still the same?
No, I think they're pretty much the same. Specifically the buff right now, because boy, they've
Yeah.
become super popular with the whole COVID thing. So
Right?
when I'm out for a run or a hike, it's super easy. I mean, I already just wear it around my neck for all kinds of reasons, but now in addition, I can just throw it up over my nose whenever I'm running past people and that kind of thing. So it's become even more of my favorite outdoor gear item. And yeah, and I would always say that my most essential is having some sort of light just in case, and emergency blanket just in case.
And what about you, Derek? Got any favorites or most
So
essentials?
on the favorite side, I have two answers. One, just my hiking shoes,
Mm.
and sometimes those change. Right now, I'm wearing ultras for hiking and backpacking. But what I really like about it is just watching my shoes wear down, because it's this sign to me that I'm doing something and then using them and getting outdoors and things like that. So that's one of my favorite. And then the other piece is a kind of a nerd geek thing. Like, I'm really fascinated with my Z Pack backpack right now, which is an ultralight backpack, and
Mm.
that was really nice to have on those 4 days around Mount Hood, just because it's not as heavy as another pack, but it works just as well. So that's awesome. And then on the essentials, um, water filters seem like the big thing now, and Sawyer water filters are incredible. So I don't have to carry gallons and gallons of water, as long as there's a water source out there somewhere. And then trekking poles. I'm not as young as I used to be, and those trekking poles really save my knees. And I almost always have them when I'm taking off into the wilderness on a hike, or even on a run on ultras. I ran with trekking poles and learned to train with trekking poles, especially for the downhills.
Absolutely. The polls thing, I'm just like, why didn't I do this before
Yeah,
now?
that's exactly what I thought when I started using them.
Why would I ever not do this? We have one race here that I just absolutely love. It goes up a mountain called Blazy Mountain, but really that's not true. Anyway, the mountain's called Lazy Mountain, and this trail is like a lot of trails in Alaska, straight up. And that race specifically does not allow poles.
Oh,
So there is reason to train without them, but otherwise, I'm all about that pole life.
wow.
Like, just sign me up and hand them to me because, yes,
Yeah.
and I am a no shame uphill pole user as
But
well.
if they're
Just
in
to
my hands,
drag
that's what
yourself
I
up
need.
the mountain
Yeah, yeah.
with your arms. So big fan. Okay, so we like to close the podcast hearing about your most favorite outdoor moment ever, just sort of like one of these close your eyes and take us there kind of things. Michelle had one last time. Derek, you described a place you love to be at the beginning of the podcast, but maybe you have somewhere that you have shared together that's your most favorite outdoor moment. So if you close your eyes, where
Yeah.
are you?
Well, I actually mentioned it earlier, and it was our hike up to, or it was supposed to be a snowshoe up to Pear Lake, and we stayed in the cabin, but then got up early the next morning and hiked the rest of the distance up to Pear Lake in the Sierra Nevada, and it was absolutely incredible. I mean, you're looking at the spires of the Sierra, the sun is rising, you're standing on this frozen lake that's covered in fresh snow. So the crunching of the snow as you walk across that lake, or spend time on that lake, and the crisp air, the coldness on your face and your nose as that morning cool air is blowing against it, is definitely one of my favorite experiences. And we experienced that together, and we've had a number of them, but that's the one that's come to mind right now.
I think I remember another cool thing we did on the lake that morning was we do this a lot. We'll be in a place and one of us will like, wait, be quiet. And we kind of sit there for a minute and it's just so insanely quiet. It's just like the coolest thing. And I do think we did that at
Yeah.
Pear Lake that
Yep.
morning. And it was just beautiful because, yeah, like you said, you've got that crisp air that you're feeling at the same time, the morning sun shining through. So it's just like all of your sensors are feeling this thing. And even in the absence of sound, it makes you just kind of more in tune with your sense of hearing because there is no sound, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you both for being on the Humans Outside podcast today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thanks for having us.
That's it for this week's episode of the Humans Outside podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, give us a little love and leave a rating and review to make it easier for other listeners to find the podcast too. Until next time, we'll see you out there.